Welcome, I'm Jon Caldara, president of the Independence Institute and your devil's advocate. I wanted to talk about the state of what used to be the Republican Party around these parts, and, well, is there any hope? From the Colorado Sun, you read them there all the time. Mario Nicolais, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, John.
And the guy who single-handedly destroyed the Republican movement in Colorado, Dick Wadhams. Good,
John.
Good to see you
Nice to
again.
see you.
All right, I want to start off with recall fever, in that, let's see, so it was about 5 years ago, going on 6 years ago, 3 senators got recalled, 2, and then the one quit before it happened. I never would have pulled the trigger, pardon the pun, on those recalls because it's such a dangerous gambit, but it worked out. Are we ready for that again?
Well, I'm not sure. I think the one in Greeley with Representative Galindo, I think does have some potential because of the oil and gas vote that she took. And Weld County, of course, is deeply affected by that. But I'm not sure. I'm very pessimistic. Well, not pessimistic. I'm just downright bewildered by why they would try to recall Polis. It takes 600,000 signatures, and I just don't think that's in the cards. The other legislative districts.
Stop there for a second, though.
Yeah.
Isn't that just a symbol of just the massive frustration we're having? It is a fool's errand to try to even get the signatures. Yeah. For that recall, but I get a sense that people are so frustrated by the progressive whiplash here. They want to do something. If you don't know any better, this seems like a good idea.
Yeah, and that's the problem. I think a lot of well-meaning people are behind that, and they don't have any comprehension of the magnitude of trying to take out a governor in a recall. And they're going to find out very quickly, though.
I bring it over here. Recall fever.
Well, I mean, I think it's a good point to bring up about whether this is just angst that's built up, particularly among Republicans, because they got walloped in the last election. And I think that is what we're seeing right now. Because, for instance, even though we're seeing a couple recalls, and we've got one that's actually going on versus Representative Galindo, there's not a lot of actual political upside on that. You know, Republicans have 29 seats out of the 65 House seats. Beating her means that Democrats will only have a 15 vote, margin there. So really, as far as political strategy, anything in the House is hard to see as political strategy. So I see it really as Republicans have a lot of angst. I think that Representative Galindo gave them something to focus that angst on in that bill, Senate Bill 181.
It is completely symbolic. I compared it to the Doolittle raid, which did very little damage, but was really important for morale. It was really important to show the Japanese, hey, we can strike you, and you said it couldn't happen. I think she gets recalled. I think the damage that she has foisted on her district, and for that reason, I really don't think it's any of the other reasons. I think it is a unique case.
But you pointed out in your column too, John, quite correctly, that Governor Scott Walker of Wisconsin was strengthened when he was recalled, and he beat the recall in Wisconsin a few years ago. That is the danger, because you empower and in many ways you strengthen the incumbent if you lose. 6 years ago that you mentioned, there were a lot of other dynamics other than the gun issues in those districts. And Mario, you'll remember, I mean, the Democratic state senator in Pueblo, most Democrats did not like her. They were willing to kick her out of office, suffer a Republican for 2 years, and then take the seat back, ironically, with Leroy Garcia. Kind of the same thing happened with, who was the Senate President? John Morris. In El Paso County.
Well, same thing with Evie Hudak, who resigned before.
And so the conditions were, you had a major issue, plus you had a lot of consternation within the Democratic Party with those 3 seats. So it takes a combination of a lot of factors, I think.
Well, the John Morris seat was particularly dangerous.
Yes.
Because this was a Bloomberg play several years ago. If he survived, John Morris, Bloomberg would have lifted him on rose petals to every state legislature in the country and say, look, you can take on the NRA and survive. Yeah. He only lost by 300 votes. It was tight. Going up to Weld County, 90% of our oil and gas comes from her district.
Right.
For me, it's like somebody who represents Vail voting against skiing. You just don't do that. Will they be successful? or how will they be successful?
You know, I think a couple things come into play. First, what kind of energy they bring. And I think that a lot of the locals there have brought a lot of energy. There's a lot more going on up there right now, and there was a second recall group that was involved, and unfortunately, I think really gave a lot of wind to the sails of Galindo and protecting yourself.
How so?
Well, this group got involved, and there was a pastor in particular who was involved that brought it up, and basically called her. I'm trying to think what it was. It was a homosexual. I'm sorry.
Pervert.
Pervert. Yes,
pervert.
A homosexual pervert was in one of his sermons, and it's just given sales to her and the Democrats who were supporting her, and they basically painted everybody with the same brush.
Even though I think she was elected to city council as a lesbian, there's a lesbian on the city council who's a Latino as well. You know, that's not going to be the reason why she gets yanked out of office, is it?
You know, and I don't think so. And I think that one of the things that you see is when I went through the contributions for the committee that's there right now, that's really kind of running this and got the petitions, they actually have supporters including B.J. Nichol, who was a hero of the gay rights movement. She supported civil unions in 2013, which was the big breakthrough for them. This is not someone who is anti-gay. That said, by creating this issue, now you have Democrats saying, oh, it's about this issue, Republicans saying, oh, it's about this issue. Really, it's about Republicans and Democrats fighting each other, just as they've always done, picking something to energize themselves.
Are there other House or Senate seats that a recall could be successful? I know there's whispers about every one. I mean, if they're talking about recalling Polis, you know, there are easier steps. What other districts might this boil up to?
Well,
and would you recommend they pull the trigger on it?
Yeah, I'm very leery of recalls, John, because of what you just said. If you fail, you have lifted up that incumbent. You've made them more credible. You've vindicated their agenda.
Well, and the agenda of their whole team.
Of the whole team. Right. I think Leroy Garcia is in a precarious situation right now. Probably not enough to lose a recall, but you know, he waited forever to vote against red flag. He took no leadership as Senate president to try to kill it or to oppose it when it got introduced. He did vote for 181. I think you could go through the sex education bill he supported, and believe me, there are a lot of culturally conservative Democrats, Catholics in Pueblo, and evangelicals as well, for that matter. So I think he could be vulnerable, but boy, do you want to pull the trigger on that?
The red flag bill for me was fascinating.
Yeah.
You guys have been close enough to this. If the Senate president didn't want that bill to see the light of day, it would never have seen the light of day. No. The fact that he was able to do a token no vote on it really threw another senator under the bus, because then she had to vote for it in order for it to pass. Mm-hmm. But can I just get a quick yes? He could have killed this. So to say that he's representing his district and voting no, if I were his district, I would feel completely insulted by that.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. He could have stopped it if he wanted to. I think that the political calculus he's doing is that the people in his district aren't going to split those hairs. They're going to say, oh, well, he voted no, that's fine. You have to be kind of someone who follows politics pretty closely to understand those machinations.
Although 181 might be different. When 112, the fracking ban, failed last year, the number one county against it was Weld. The number two was Mesa. And number three was Pueblo, his district. There's not a single active well in Pueblo. No. I would imagine, I don't see him getting recalled, but I can guarantee you people will be talking about it.
Yeah.
What would you say to them? Would you say go for it?
No, I probably wouldn't, John. Because unlike his predecessor, Angela Herron, who was recalled, people do like Leroy. I mean, you know, he's a genuinely likable guy, and he's a former Marine. I mean, you know, he's different than Angela was. She was very disliked by a lot of Democrats for whatever reason. I think overall the Democrats do like him. They would rally around him.
Mario, would you give him that same advice?
You know, I think it's up to the people of each district to kind of look what they're doing.
What are you running for office? Come on, give me an answer.
No. And here's why. I do think that if there's some strategic value in recalls for Republicans, it's got to be in the state Senate. I don't know if specifically you go after him or if you look at some districts that are closer. that might be a little bit closer, that might be less of a reach. So Senate District 16, for example, that used to be represented by Senator Neville, and he lost this last election. Maybe those are closer. Plus, they just got elected, so it's a 4-year term right now. So you're looking at 4 years unless you do a recall. There might be better strategic moves to do. That said, I agree with Dick. They're hard, and you have to have the right environment. 2013 was the right environment to go after those senators. 2015 was the right environment for Democrats and liberals in Jefferson County to go after Jeffco school board members. So let's remember, both sides play this game. But there was an energy that was there, and maybe SB 181 provides that. I'm not quite sold yet that it does.
I don't know if it translates until the economic damage comes. It's interesting. The Denver Post says, "Stop the hysterics about 181. It's not going to be that damaging." The Gazette says this could cause a statewide recession. So I think it might take some time to percolate to see what it does for the state. The one thing I think can happen is the national popular vote putting the brakes on that. We are now officially part of the compact. But only insiders get this part. At the end of the bill, they put in the petition clause, not the emergency clause or the safety clause. And you have to put one or the other. And since they put this one, it makes it open to a referendum, which we haven't seen in 90 years. There's some good people on the grassroots saying, we're going to refer this. If they're successful to get it on the ballot, just even getting on the ballot, the bill gets put on ice, the law gets put on ice until next year, and we get a vote on it. I see that as a really effective counterpunch for what's going on. Let's start over here this time. I see it as something that this is doable, and it has a huge policy outcome, and it's something that those of us who feel run over by the progressives can focus on.
I totally agree. I think, first of all, I think that issues are easier to run against than people. Because people can really talk about, is this a good policy, bad policy? I think that the national popular vote is a terrible policy. I think that adoption of it was a terrible idea. I testified against it. And honestly, I think that a lot of people look at this and say, hey, Democrats didn't like the rules, so they're changing the rules, and that's just not fair. It's just a basic fairness issue. Plus, also, it kind of feels like you're spitting in the eyes of the founding fathers. Our founders created this system specifically because they said we need a system that protects the voices of minorities, minority parties, and this would do away with that. And
it's another slap in the face to rural Colorado. I get it. The power structure is Boulder, Denver, more Boulder now than Denver. But there is a world outside that deserves to be represented. Is this a winnable issue?
It is, and John, what I find is an intensity among Republicans that is I've rarely seen to get this on the ballot. It's almost like it's become the clearinghouse for all the other frustrations Republicans have about all the other bad bills, 181, sex education, family leave, all these things, red flag, whatever. But they see this as the embodiment of really putting it to the Democrats if they can get it on the ballot. I think it will get on the ballot, especially if they can find some funding for some paid petitioning. And once it's on the ballot, all bets are off.
Right, and I think they're out of step with most Coloradans on this. But let's switch to Republicans particularly. After every election, you wouldn't know this, but after every election, it's always the Republican Party that gets blamed for whatever goes wrong. I don't know if that's fair. Republican Party can't fundraise the way that it used to. You had this position of party chair. Now it's Ken Buck. Is that a good decision, one, for Ken Buck, but is it a good decision for the party?
Well, Ken, he's a sitting congressman. He'll be able to raise money. I think he's going to find it very difficult to do both jobs because it is a time-consuming job. Even when we had wealthy business leaders who didn't get paid full time, you spend a lot of time at that job. But ultimately, what matters in elections, John, are candidates and campaigns. The party has some definite roles in terms of get out the vote, the victory program. I think the state chairman position is a very powerful bully pulpit for the state chair if he or she wants to use it. I tried to use it as much as I could, beating up on Bennett and Hickenlooper back in those days. But ultimately, it's not going to be Ken Buck's fault, and it wouldn't have been Susan Beckman's fault if Cory is unseated. It's going to be whether Cory can put together the campaign to win that election. For Ken Buck, for instance, he was our nominee in 2010. Ken Buck should have beaten Michael Bennet. Ken Buck made some serious mistakes in October that got Bennet back in the race, and Bennet won the election. We've seen that over and over, unfortunately, in Colorado politics. Candidates and campaigns are what matter.
There was an old model that you'd have some rich business guy being the chairman, and then they'd hire a hack to run the operations.
Right.
And it actually worked out pretty well.
Yeah.
You have Bruce Benson for so many years being a very effective party chair, and then they'd hire somebody to do it. This seems like that same sort of thing, except instead of a rich businessman, it's a connected congressman, because congressmen have to raise money. Unfair comparison?
I think a little bit, and the reason why is because Colorado's changed. It's just not the same as it was when Bruce Benson was chair of the Republican Party. And we have seen demographic changes, we've seen changes in the way that people vote. You've got the rise of millennials. So it's a little bit unfair to that extent. I do think, though, when you look at that, you also realize that the Republican Party vesting so much faith in the party itself to do so much is interesting, whereas when the Democrats don't, they actually look to the outside, an outside structure. And all those things that happen on the outside of the Democratic Party actually happen within the party and the Republican side, and it just isn't able to do it as well because they have campaign finance limitations, and they do have some
You just said something that, you said it and everybody nods their head. No, let's drill down on this. The Democrats outsourced everything the party does, except for a few small things, and built it up, what we nicknamed the blueprint, and put in the think tanks, the lawsuit organizations, and the funding organizations, and the door knockers, and the databases, and the voter drives, and every identity politics machine you could think of. And Republicans still go, what's wrong with the party? By the way, that voice is actually younger than most Republicans now. What's wrong with the party? And I don't know why anybody wants to be party chair, because no matter what you do, you get hated. You wouldn't know anything about this, but what our team doesn't get is that the party doesn't do that much other than choose a candidate.
Well, I mean, and then go to that, the chairman doesn't actually choose the candidate either.
Right,
I mean, I'm going to throw this out there. I don't think that Dick chose Dan Mays. The worst Republican choice, well, in the history of Colorado, probably.
I was there. Dick Wadhams was working behind the scenes feverishly to make Dan Mays the nominee. There was no doubt about it.
But you hear this all the time, that the party or the establishment has chosen the candidates that we've got, and it's just it's almost laughable.
Dan Mays, who got 10% of the vote, it was your fault because you didn't vet him. Or if you did try to vet somebody, it would be your fault for playing favorites. Yes. It is a no-win position.
And John, I listened to a lot of conservative talk radio during the week, and it has amused me that I kept hearing all these people say on the air, and I'm not going to say names or anything, but
why not?
That the state chairman and the state party need to do what the Democrats did. And as Mario, more than as a campaign finance lawyer, knows, the party cannot do that. It's totally separate from the party. Republicans don't even have a fundamental understanding of the law, much less of the politics.
Well, and also, actually, and the tax code around this, with the difference between a C3, a C4, a 527, and an issue committee.
Yes.
It's not that hard, but we're still locked into this old model.
You're right.
All right. Are the demographics just gone? It used to be Republicans, Democrats, unaffiliated as far as party registration. Now it's unaffiliated, Democrats, Republicans. Let's bring it to Cory. We've got a little bit of time left. Cory has to thread a needle to get reelected. And I don't know if the party or conservatives are going to help him or hinder him. What is a secret for Cory to get reelected?
Well, his biggest problem, and I am not a Trump detractor. I love the policies that Trump has enacted, but Trump will be a problem for us in 2020. He is not popular in Colorado. He will not win Colorado. Cory has got to run a campaign.
Say that one more time, because there are people out there who believe Trump will win in Colorado, that it is possible, because be more Trump-like, look what Trump did. And Trump did win in Pennsylvania and Ohio and Michigan. I'm thrilled.
Right.
We ain't those states.
No. And John, during that state chair's race, all the candidates were talking about how if we had just done a better get out the vote effort, we could have gotten all those Trump voters out to vote that didn't vote. I'm thinking, where were they? There aren't any. Anyway, what Cory's got to do is find a sliver of those millennials and those unaffiliated voters who will vote against Trump. They're going to vote for the Democratic candidate, but who will be open to voting for Cory Gardner, because he is a smart young guy. And I think he can make the case to them that I'm not Donald Trump. I'm an incumbent U.S. Senator who's done the following things for Colorado. If he can find that slice of the electorate of those unaffiliated, he can win. The question is, can he find them? I think he can. But it's going to be hard.
I think it's going to be hard.
Really hard.
Everyone is salivating over this seat, which is why one of the things that helps Cory is not only that, but this Democratic overreach. People might say, not Trump, but what's going on in here is crazy. We're not Berkeley statewide. Give me your advice for Cory.
Well, a couple things. I think, first of all, I am an unapologetic never Trumper, so I don't actually think that he won those states. I think Hillary Clinton lost them because Democrats just simply picked the very worst candidate they could possibly run. And hey,
and they might do it again. By the way,
they might do it again. They may do it again. Never overlook the ability of Democrats on a nationwide basis to pick a really bad candidate. That said, I think what Cory really needs here is he needs a little bit of leeway from people in the party to go after those unaffiliated and go after those people with policies that he talks about that aren't going to earn him a primary. Because from the day that he took office, you heard some people in the state who wanted to primary Cory Gardner because he wasn't conservative enough and he wasn't putting forth policies that they really wanted to see put forward. That would lose him the election and re-election. And Republicans,
a primary would lose him the election?
I think it would.
Really? Let me go over here. Would a primary against Cory lose him the election?
Well, I'm afraid it might, John, because it would result in a bunch of Republicans staying home or not filling out that race on the ballot.
In the general election?
Yeah, in the general election. And that's why he voted for the Emergency Powers Bill. That bill, if he had voted against that, believe me, he would have had a primary. Now, I think that will hurt him in the general election. And so it was a real tough call. I think he probably made the right move, just from pure political sense, just because I think it did. I haven't heard nearly as much about a primary, Mario, since that vote, to be honest. But it still could happen. I mean, we're a year away.
Right.
Well, and also, Cory Gardner has to, one, be not Trump, the way you explained, but he can't come out and be what Mike Kaufman was, to be a Trump antagonist, because then his base goes away as well, and he invites it. I think there's a possibility if there's a recall, or not a recall, so if there's a primary, does it make him a better candidate? Yeah, maybe, but not this year.
Yeah.
I think anyone who primaries him, all you're doing is guaranteeing a Democrat victory in the fall.
I agree. And I said about conservative talk radio, it has really calmed down a lot. I mean, I will tell you, 6 months ago.
What has calmed down? What
is talk about primarying Cory? 6 months ago, that's all you heard, and you still hear it a little bit. But I will tell you that now there's almost a reluctance on the part of the very people who were calling for a primary earlier are now kind of, he's our only chance to hold the seat, and President Trump needs his vote in the Senate. They finally kind of figured that out. That Cory actually has been a good supporter of Trump's agenda. You know, the judicial nominations, the tax cuts, deregulation. Cory's been there for the president. And those are the things I like too. I don't like his behavior, but...
Now, let's be clear. He's going to be the #1 targeted senator in 2020. There is no one about. Susan Collins represents a state that is moderately more Democrat than Colorado, but she's loved.
But she's also moderately more Democrat than most Democrats. So it's not like
fair, but she gets reelected. And that's the name of the game, is actually getting reelected. And I think that's one of the things that you see right now is Cory's going to be their top target. Yeah. He's going to be number one. So I don't even want to guess what this race is going to cost. You could easily see $30 million, $40 million, maybe at $50 million spent on this race. And the only reason that you wouldn't get there, is if someone's getting blown out. Mm-hmm. If we get to September, October, and someone's getting just blown out.
Yeah. And I don't see the Democrat being the one getting blown out in the polls on this presidential year. Also, if there was a challenger to him, you'd hear it from Trump. Trump, I think, would come in and go, "What the hell are you doing?"
I agree.
And I think there are more. I think Trump will do better this year, this next election in Colorado, than he did before. I don't think it's going to go in the opposite direction. Wow. I think that there are more, especially after Senate Bill 181 starts working its magic, working class people start feeling the pinch that they're not valued outside of the Denver-Boulder bubble, and that's going to first resonate in Weld County, then it's going to hit in Pueblo. And I think Pueblo is a bit more of a Trumpy place than people think. Yeah. That those are working class Democrats that they'll listen to him. So
he carried it last time. Carried Pueblo last time. Yeah.
And Adams County is a little bit similar in that regard. I think you see a lot of those things play out. I don't know that people will actually put SB 181 together with its effects. I think for a lot of the electorate, it's too much inside baseball. But if it causes the economy to dip, and if you see Colorado's economy dipping and struggling, the people that get hurt the worst are going to be working class folks in Pueblo, in Adams, and in Denver. Because frankly, when you're talking about presidential election, a vote in Denver is worth just as much anywhere else.
Mario, thank you. Dick Wadhams, thank you. Listen for me on KHOW Radio. Read me in the Denver Post. Tell a friend about the Independence Institute. We'll see you next week.